Good morning. In the last class, we have learned about a bar magnet. Now, in today's class, we are extending this idea about a bar magnet to learn about Earth's magnetism or terrestrial magnetism. So, we may straight away start our lesson. So, welcome back. We know that a freely suspended magnetic needle comes to rest in the north-south direction, or it will align in the north-south direction. So what is the reason? The reason is due to the magnetic property of Earth. So why this magnet is aligning in the north-south direction? It is due to the magnetism of Earth. So we can assume that there is a huge magnet hiding inside the Earth. So this is how a magnet aligns when it is suspended freely on the surface of Earth. So a magnet is aligning like this due to the effect of another magnetic field, or in other words, it is due to the magnetic field of Earth that a freely suspended bar magnet aligns in the north-south direction. So here you can see the magnetic field of Earth, and this is how the magnetic field lines are present around a bar magnet. This is the axis of the bar magnet, and the field lines are, you can see, they are moving in this way, and actually this is a continuous path. The path is continuous inside the bar magnet also. It forms, or the magnetic field lines forms a loop that we have already learned. So inside the Earth there is a huge magnet hiding. So this is how it looks like. Please note that this is just a hypothetical concept. There is no actual magnet which is hiding inside the Earth. So Earth's magnetism is supposed to be due to a huge magnet hiding inside the Earth, and this is how it is aligned. So this is the south pole of that huge magnet, and this is the north pole of the huge magnet. That is why a bar magnet which is on the surface of Earth will align in the north to south direction, because this is the north pole, and since this is the south pole present here, so it will be aligned towards the north, or it will be aligned like this due to the presence of a south pole here. So this is that huge bar magnet which is supposed to be hiding inside the Earth. So it is aligned like this, right? So the axis of Earth's magnetism is like this, and here on the surface of Earth it will be north pole, because if we, as already told, if we suspend a bar magnet freely, it will align in this direction. So that direction is taken as north pole for us, and this is the south pole on the surface of Earth. So a bar magnet is aligning like this just because of a magnetism inside the Earth, for which the south pole is upward and north pole is downward. That is the concept, and this is the axis of that huge hypothetical bar magnet, and this is not the axis of rotation of Earth, or in other words, the axis of rotation of Earth and the axis of this bar magnet are different. So for us, this is the north pole, such that inside the earth there is a hypothetical bar magnet with a south pole in the upward direction. So this is how the magnetic field lines are present around the surface of earth. Then this is the axis of rotation of earth, and in that case this is the north pole, which is called the geographic north pole, and this is the here will be the geographic south pole, and for us this is the magnetic north pole. So magnetic north pole will be different from geographic north pole. In other words, we have two types of north. One is a magnetic north, which is due to the huge hypothetical magnet hiding inside the earth, and then we have this geographic north pole, which arises due to the rotation of the earth, or this pole is along the axis of the rotation of the earth, and you can see this axis of the magnetism is not aligned with the axis of rotation of earth. There is a small angle between the two axes. So there are two types of, in short, there are two types of north poles. One is the magnetic north pole, other one is geographic north pole. Similarly, there will be magnetic and geographic south poles also, and this axis does not overlap each other. Then this earth's magnetism is actually not fixed. It will reverse in some years. From experimental observations, it has been deduced that Earth's magnetic poles have reversed regularly over the geologic history, and this reversal occurs about every 200,000 to 300,000 years, and it has been recorded that such kind of reversal of the Earth's magnetism is taking place for the last 4.6 billion years. The source of Earth's magnetism is not yet completely understood, but it is assumed to be due to some sort of dynamo effect. So what is this dynamo effect? So inside the earth there is iron, nickel, cobalt, etc. minerals which are in the molten state, and with the rotation of the earth about its axis, this molten core also rotates. So this molten core also, so this is the diagram shown here, this molten core also rotates, and this produces a circulating current, and due to the circulating current there will be a magnetic field. So that is how this magnetic field, or that is how this magnetism of earth is produced, and this is what is called dynamo effect. So it is because of the motion of the iron, nickel, cobalt, etc. inside the earth, which is in rotation due to the rotation of earth about its axis. This produces a surface current, which in turn produces a magnetism. This is called dynamo effect. And this magnetic field of earth has some useful purpose in our life. So it protects the earth from the solar wind. So earth is protected from the solar wind, strong solar wind, because of the earth's magnetism. Otherwise these solar winds, which are highly charged particles, will enter into the surface of earth, and it will heat up the surface of earth. these charged particles entering the surface of Earth or surface of Earth will experience a magnetic force and they will be drifted away from entering the surface of Earth. In the absence of this Earth's magnetism, these charged particles will be able to enter into the surface of Earth, and it will heat up the surface of Earth, and life on Earth will be impossible if that had happened. Similarly, it can protect us from ultraviolet radiation which is entering into the surface of Earth. So in short, this Earth's magnetism help us to protect us from highly charged particles from the sun, which is called solar wind, and also from the cosmic rays. It helps us to protect us from cosmic rays also. And this is the magnetic North Pole, and this is the geographic North Pole. There are some technical terms connected with terrestrial magnetism or Earth's magnetism. So we will look into the different technical terms that we normally use in connection with Earth's magnetism. So if this is the Earth and this is the axis of rotation of the Earth, then this is the North Pole, or this is the geographic North Pole, and this is the South Pole or geographic South Pole. So this geographic axis help us to define geographic North Pole and geographic South Pole. So geographic axis is a straight line passing through the geographical poles of the Earth. It is the axis of rotation of the Earth. It is also known as polar axis. It is called polar axis because it is passing through the two poles of the Earth. Then there is another term which is the geographic meridian. Geographic meridian is a vertical plane passing through the geographic north and south poles of the Earth. So we can assume this Earth is formed out of two hemispheres as shown here. So this is a plane. This is the plane of this hemisphere, and this is another plane of the second hemisphere. So this plane, you can assume that this plane is nothing but a geographic meridian, because this plane passed through the north and south poles. So from the definition, geographic meridian is a vertical plane passing through the geographic north and geographic south pole of the Earth. So this is the point of geographic North Pole and South Pole. So this plane is passing through the geographic north and south pole. So these two planes actually represent geographic meridian. So this is how you can visualize or you can imagine this geographic meridian. So for that purpose, we are assuming that the Earth is formed out of two hemispheres of equal size, and the plane that we are getting when we cut a solid sphere is nothing but a geographic meridian. Then geographic equator. So we are all familiar with equator. Geographic equator is the great circle on the surface of Earth, such that all the points on the geographic equator are at equal distances from the geographic poles. So equator is a very basic concept that we have already learned in our high school classes. So this is how we are representing an equator. So all the points will be at equal distance from the geographic north and south poles. So it will be exactly at the middle of the north and south poles. Then similar to this geographic north and geographic south pole, we know that from the previous discussion, there is a magnetic north pole and magnetic south pole. So now an axis is drawn through this magnetic north and magnetic south poles, right? So this is called magnetic axis. Now with reference to or similar to this geographic axis, we have magnetic axis also. So magnetic axis is a straight line passing through the magnetic poles of the earth. It is inclined to the geographic axis nearly at an angle of 11.3 degree. So this angle is not correct. It is 11.3 degree. I mean 11.5 degree. Okay. So the angle between these two axes is 11.5 degree. Now similar to geographic meridian, we have magnetic meridian. So it is a vertical plane passing through the magnetic north and magnetic south poles of the earth. So this is very similar to geographic meridian. Here also you can assume this earth is formed of two hemispheres, and the plane that you are getting of this hemisphere will be the meridian or the magnetic meridian in this case. Then magnetic equator is a great circle on the surface of earth such that all the points on the magnetic equator are at equal distance from the magnetic poles. So in the previous definition, it is this equator will be all the points of this equator will be at equal distance from the geographic pole. Here all these points are at equal distance from the magnetic pole. That is the difference. So please note that the angle is 11.5 degree. Now we will discuss another term which is called magnetic declination. The angle between the magnetic meridian and the geographic meridian at a place is called declination at that place. That means this magnetic declination will be changing from place to place. So if we find the angle between magnetic meridian and geographical meridian, we can find the inclination or magnetic declination of that point. So how to find this angle magnetic declination? Suppose we want to find the declination at the point A. So from A we may draw an axis to the magnetic north pole and geographic north pole. Now there is an angle between these two. This refers to the declination or magnetic declination at this place. Or at the place A, this is how we are finding the magnetic declination. Now suppose we want to find the declination at the point B. So from B again we are drawing two lines which are passing through this declination, through these two poles. And here you can see that for the case of A, the angle theta is very small compared to that at B. Or in other words, if we move towards the equator, this angle theta is increasing. The magnetic declination increases as we move towards equator. In other words, if we move towards the pole, the magnetic declination angle will be decreasing. Okay, so the reason is this axis will make a wide angle, or this will make a wide angle if we are moving towards equator, and it will make a small angle if we are moving towards the poles. Now suppose there is a point which is on the say geographic north. So if the point C is at the geographic north, the angle between this magnetic north and the geographic north will be 0. So in that case, this magnetic declination will be 0. That means this magnetic declination varies from place to place. Lines through the places that have the same declination are called isogonic lines. Then line drawn through places that have 0 declination is called agonic line. Another term is magnetic inclination or dip. The angle between the horizontal component of Earth's magnetic field and the Earth's resultant magnetic field at a place is called dip or inclination at that place. So here again we can see that this inclination will be changing from place to place, because the resultant magnetic field will be changing from place to place. At equator, Earth's resultant magnetic field will be parallel to the horizontal, or Earth's resultant field is along the horizontal direction of the Earth. So in that case, there is no angle between the horizontal and the Earth's resultant field. But if we are moving away from the equator, or as one moves towards pole, Earth's magnetic field B, or the resultant magnetic field B, points more and more downward. That means if we are moving away from equator towards the pole with a magnetic needle at our hand, we can see that the needle is pointing more and more down as we approach the pole. That means the needle makes a small dip from the horizontal direction. So from the horizontal direction, the Earth's magnetic field makes a small angle, or it makes a dip. So in that case, we can see that there is a small angle delta formed here, and that is what is called dip. So it makes an angle with the horizontal if we are moving away from the equator, or if we are approaching the north or south pole. That means now this B can have two components. One is along the horizontal direction, which is BH, and other one is along the vertical direction, which is BV. Now we can write these components of B along the horizontal and vertical directions. So B cos delta along the horizontal direction, therefore BH is equal to B cos delta, and B sin delta along the vertical direction, therefore BV is equal to B sin delta. Now squaring the two equations, we will get BH square is equal to B square cos square delta, and BV square is equal to B square sin square delta. Now therefore we can add BH square and BV square. So BH square plus BV square will be B square into sin square delta plus cos square delta, but sin square delta plus cos square delta is 1. Therefore B square is equal to BH square plus BV square, and from this we can find the value of resultant magnetic field, that is B. Earth's resultant magnetic field B will be square root of BH square plus BV square. So B is equal to root of BH square plus BV square is equation for B from BH and BV. Then what about the angle delta? So how to find the angle delta? So we have B sin delta is equal to BV, and B cos delta is equal to BH. Now we may divide one by the other, that is B sin delta divided by B cos delta. So sin delta by cos delta is 1, therefore it is tan delta. Tan delta is equal to BV by BH. So if we know the value of BV and BH, we can find the value of tan delta and hence the angle delta. Now magnetic materials have been classified into 3. So now let us look into this classification of magnetic materials. They are diamagnetic, paramagnetic and ferromagnetic. So diamagnetic substances are those which are feebly repelled by a magnet. Examples are given here. Then paramagnetics are those substances which are feebly attracted by another magnet. Ferromagnetic substances are those which are strongly attracted by the external magnet or external magnetic field. Then, so this is how their magnetization are different. So one is feebly repelled, that means its magnetism will be opposite to that of the applied magnetic field. And para is feebly attracted, that means it will be having the same type of magnetism but it is feebly attracted. And ferro means it is strongly attracted by the external magnetic field. Then when diamagnetic materials are placed in a external magnetic field, these lines of force will be repelled away as shown here. And for para, these will be slightly crowded inside the paramagnetic material. And in the case of ferromagnetic material, these are heavily crowded. The magnetic field lines are, or the external magnetic field lines will be heavily crowded inside the ferromagnetic material. Then diamagnetic materials, when placed in a non-uniform magnetic field, it moves from stronger to weaker field, or it is a feeble repulsion. And for paramagnetic material, which when placed in a non-uniform field, it moves from weaker to stronger field. And for ferromagnetic materials, when they are placed in a non-uniform field, it moves weaker to stronger field, or it is a strong attraction. It is a case of strong attraction. Then when a diamagnetic rod is freely suspended in a uniform magnetic field, it aligns itself in a direction perpendicular to the field in the case of diamagnetic material. And for paramagnetic material, the rod is freely suspended in a uniform magnetic field, and it then aligns itself in a direction parallel to the field. And lastly, it should be ferromagnetic rod. So when a ferromagnetic rod is freely suspended in a uniform magnetic field, it aligns itself in a direction parallel to the field very quickly. Then if a diamagnetic liquid taken in a watch glass is placed in uniform magnetic field, it collects away from the center when the magnetic poles are closer. That means when these two poles are closer, these liquids will be collecting away like this, and it collects at the center when the magnetic poles are farther. So if the two poles are farther, you can see this magnetic liquid collects at the center. So the concentration is more at the center when the two poles are farther, and when the two poles are closer, the concentration will be or the concentration of this diamagnetic material will be as shown here. Then if paramagnetic liquid is taken in a watch glass, is placed in a uniform magnetic field, it collects at the center when the poles are closer. So like this. So the poles are, the north and south poles are closer, and this is how the paramagnetic liquid is collected. And they collects away from the center when the magnetic poles are farther. So when the magnetic poles are farther like this, then this is how the paramagnetic liquids are collected. So there is a dip at the center here. Then for a ferromagnetic liquid, if it is taken in a watch glass, and if it is placed in a uniform magnetic field with the two poles closer to each other, then you can see that it colors at the center. So it colors at the center as shown here, similar to that of the paramagnetic liquids. And when the poles are away from each other, we can see it forms a dip at the center of the watch glass. So the next point is what happens when they are placed in a magnetic field. So for a diamagnetic material, it is weakly magnetized in the direction opposite to the external field. For a paramagnetic material, it is weakly magnetized in the direction of the external field. And for a ferromagnetic materials, it is strongly magnetized in the direction of the external induced field. The next point is how the dipole moment are different. So for a diamagnetic material, the dipole moment is small and negative. For a paramagnetic material, dipole moment is small and positive. For a ferromagnetic material, dipole moment is large and positive. Then how the intensity of magnetization are different. So it is a small negative value for diamagnetic, it is a small positive value for paramagnetic, and it is a large positive value for ferromagnetic material. Then the value of magnetic permeability mu. For a diamagnetic material, it is less than 1 or less than unity. For a paramagnetic material, it is more than 1 or it is greater than 1 or slightly greater than 1. But for a ferromagnetic material, it is much more than 1. It is much greater than 1. Next is magnetic susceptibility. So magnetic susceptibility for a diamagnetic material is small and negative. That for a paramagnetic material is small positive, and for a ferromagnetic material this magnetic susceptibility has a large positive value. And what is this magnetic susceptibility? Magnetic susceptibility is a measure of to what extent a material can be magnetized. Then the last point, diamagnetic material does not obey Curie's law. We will discuss Curie's law afterwards. Then paramagnetic material obey Curie's law, that is, they lose their magnetic properties with the rise in temperature. And ferromagnetic materials also obey Curie's law. At a certain temperature called Curie's point, it is also called Curie's temperature, they lose ferromagnetic properties and behave like paramagnetic substances. So both paramagnetic and ferromagnetic materials obey Curie's law. And what is Curie's law? It states that at which a ferromagnetic material loses its ferromagnetic properties and behave like a paramagnetic substance. The next topic is magnetic hysteresis. So previously we have learned that B is proportional to H, or magnetic flux density is proportional to H. H is the magnetizing field, or magnetization is proportional to magnetizing field. So there is a direct relation between, or there is a proportionality relation between magnetization and magnetizing field. But practically it is found that this magnetization lags behind the magnetizing field. Or if you apply a magnetizing field to magnetize a material, it is supposed that if you increase the intensity of the magnetizing field, the intensity of the magnetization should also increase. That is the meaning of this relation. But practically it is found that even if we increase the magnetizing field, then the magnetization of the material may not be increasing at the same rate. So this lagging of magnetization of a ferromagnetic material behind the magnetizing field is called magnetic hysteresis. And it is normally shown with a graph. So here we have this magnetizing field H, and here this M represents the magnetization intensity of magnetization. Then suppose that we are increasing the magnetizing field. This H represents the magnetizing field, and suppose that we have a ferromagnetic material which we want to magnetize, or we want to increase the magnetic property of this ferromagnetic material. So for that we are keeping a ferromagnetic material in a magnetizing field, and we have chi is equal to, or chi is equal to M by H. Therefore M is equal to chi into H. This chi is a constant. That means M is proportional to H. That means magnetization of the ferromagnetic material which is placed in a magnetizing field should be proportional to the intensity of the magnetizing field. Or if we increase the intensity of a magnetizing field, then the ferromagnetic material which is placed in this magnetic field will feel more magnetization, or it should be exposed to more magnetization. That is the meaning of this relation. But practically what happens can be shown using a graph. So here H represents the magnetizing field, M represents the magnetization of this ferromagnetic material which is placed in a magnetizing field. So we are starting from 0. Now we are increasing the intensity of the magnetizing field. So when we increase the intensity of the magnetizing field, there is a corresponding increase in the magnetization taking place of this ferromagnetic material which is placed in the magnetizing field. So in the beginning you can see that it is approximately proportional. There is a proportional relation. Now this is the maximum value of the magnetizing field we have given, and you can see that by we reach the maximum value of the magnetizing field, this proportionality relation in the beginning is losing slowly, and from here onwards there is not much improvement in the magnetization of the ferromagnetic material which is placed in the magnetizing field. Now here we stop increasing the intensity of the magnetizing field, and now we are slowly decreasing the value of the magnetizing field. Now when we decrease the value of the magnetizing field, you can see that this, with the decrease in the magnetizing field, the magnetization is not decreasing, right? So at this point again there is a magnetization. So even if we reach at this point by decreasing the magnetizing field, still there is more value for the magnetization, right? So even though we are decreasing the magnetizing field, but the magnetization of this material increases. That is why it takes a different path. So this way the magnetization of the ferromagnetic material and magnetizing fields are behaving. So now we are reversing. So from this point beyond in the left direction, the magnetizing field is reversed, right? So from this point O is the origin. If we move towards left, you can say the value of H is reversed. So when we reverse the magnetizing field, still there is a magnetization for the ferromagnetic material. So even when we reach at this point, or when we reverse the magnetizing field by 2 units, still there is a magnetization taking place for the ferromagnetic material. Okay, so now when we reach this point, you can see that the magnetization is 0, right? So we want this much reverse magnetic field to make the magnetization 0. So this way we can increase the magnetizing field maximum, right? So this is the maximum value of the reverse magnetic field we have applied, and by this time you can see that as shown in the beginning, the magnetization of the ferromagnetic material reaches a maximum value, and there is not much improvement in the reverse direction. Now again we are decreasing the magnetic field in the left side, and now it is 0. The value of the magnetizing field is 0. Now the value of the magnetizing field we increases. So at this point again we are increasing the value of the magnetizing field, and it has covered 2 points. At that time you can see that the magnetization is 0, right? So previously it was here in the beginning. At that time there was almost proportional, but at this time it is not proportional. So there is a lagging of magnetization behind the magnetizing field. So magnetization is not taking place, or this magnetization is not taking place along with the magnetizing field, but there is a difference, and this is the magnetic hysteresis. So now we may mark the direction of this curve. So we are starting from O towards A, then from A to B, B to C, C to D, then D to E, E to F, and finally F to A. So this is the path of the hysteresis curve we have drawn. Now there are some technical names for these points B and C. So what is B? At the point B, actually H is 0, right? H is the magnetizing field. So the magnetizing field is 0, and at the same time there is some value for the magnetization of the material. It is called retentivity. This point is called retentivity, represented by B subscript R. And what is retentivity? It is a value of the magnetization when the magnetizing field is reduced to 0. So we are reducing the magnetizing field to 0, right? And still there is some value of the magnetization. That is called retentivity. Then what is HC? What is the point HC? HC means we have reversed the magnetizing field, right? We have reversed the magnetizing field, and still, and at that time only you can see that the magnetization is reduced to 0, right? So the magnetization is reduced to 0 only when the magnetizing field is reversed, and this point is called coercivity. It is a reverse magnetic field applied to make the magnetization 0. So the reverse magnetic field applied, or the reverse value of the H to make the magnetization of the ferromagnetic material 0, is called coercivity. And the area of this hysteresis curve or hysteresis loop represents wastage of energy or energy loss in the form of heat. So more the area, more the wastage, small the area, small will be the wastage. So this loop is called hysteresis loop. The area of the loop gives loss of energy due to cycle of magnetization and demagnetization, and is dissipated in the form of heat. Normally we take it as a wastage of energy. The material like iron having thin loop is used for making temporary magnets, and that with a thick loop like steel is used for permanent magnet. So why we prefer steel to make a permanent magnet? Because for steel the hysteresis, the area of the hysteresis loop is thick, and when the area of the loop is thick, you can see that they will have high value of retentivity, and retentivity is one quality that we require to make permanent magnet. The qualities required for a permanent magnet are high retentivity, high coercivity, high permeability, and high value of magnetic saturation. So these are obtained, or if a material is having a thick loop, then all these qualities will be met, and steel have these qualities. For temporary magnets or electromagnets, they should have low retentivity and low coercivity. So low retentivity and low coercivity means what? The loop should be narrow, right? The loop should be very thin. So if the loop is very thin, we can have low retentivity and low coercivity. So materials like iron have such a loop, and they are used for making temporary magnet or electromagnet. So that's all for today. Thank you for watching.